Hello, this is Porter here. Once again, putting my little message in a bottle, throwing it out in the ocean, and probably no one will ever hear it, nobody will ever care. But if anything, it's just for me to be able to say it and be able to move on in life. As always, there are so many great LDS influencers out there, individuals who speak about things, doctrines, elements, community of the gospel, whatever, that if you somehow have found this and you're here listening to me, you should go listen to them instead. Stop wasting your time here. Go listen to them. And we've talked about them before they are, but they are the people I go listen to. They are worth it. Today, I would just like to talk a little bit about doubt traps, how to recognize them, how to avoid them. Of course, this is something that we are getting hit a lot in the church right now. In the past several years, we were getting hit quite a bit in the years following COVID. Once COVID hit, of course, there was this great schism point where a lot of people just went south in their testimony and stuff. And I think, I don't know, that might have been part of, I don't know, not to get too conspiratorial, but it happened. So it is something that we're struggling with. So this is a topic that we should look at, face head on, and not look at it in the traditional ways. There's lots of people that have videos out and are talking about the ways in which we've looked at people going through faith crisis, and maybe we'll talk about that here. That's not what we're doing. I'm not talking about the people who have left or who are struggling, or I guess who have left, who have made that decision. I'm talking about those people who are struggling right now and maybe need a little help. That's my intended audience, or individuals who have loved ones who are struggling and want to do that. So let's talk about that. If I were to come up to you, and assuming that you know me, you know who Porter is, and that you care about my opinion or what I would have to say, and you believe that I am somewhat trustworthy, if I were to come up to you and I would say, hey, I got bad news for you. Your car's been damaged. It looks like somebody keyed it and kicked in the headlight. Assuming, once again, that you knew me and I knew about your car and where it was, yada, yada, yada. I was a trustworthy source. What would you immediately do upon finding this out? Well, I think the human reaction, I think what all of us would do, is we would immediately say, what? And we would run out to check our car. What that is a very quick exercise in verifying truth. Somebody says something, and this person might actually be a trustworthy or seemingly intelligent source. Something gets said, the equals is the action to verify that truth. That is the normal, immediate response is, let's verify what this is. And in truth, we do this all the time in everything we do. We do this all the time. This is not something that is an alien topic. This is something we do, yet, sadly, we don't do it enough. And that's a weird thing if you think about it. This is a tool that we use all the time, yet we just don't use it enough. Whether it's our political leanings, our religious leanings, or whatever it is, we get siloed so easily, and we just believe everything that a certain source says, and if it's another source, we just automatically disregard it. And that's probably not the best tactic to take. It's like there's a scale, and on this scale we put what is being said, and on the other side of this scale we put our trust or lack of trust in whoever is saying it, and we see if it balances. But we are constantly putting our finger on that scale in either the down motion or the up motion as far as who is saying it. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, right? If the prophet says something, I'm going to trust it more. If an anti-person who I know is anti and I know their point is saying it, I'm probably going to trust it less. It is, however, a mistake to say it's true or not true right off the top of the bat without verifying for ourselves. And that is one of the great things in our church. Never in our church will you ever hear, even if it comes from the prophet, you will never hear Russell M. say, take my word for it. Joseph Smith never said, take my word for it. Maybe there's a quote miner out there who can, go find that and research that and find maybe a spot where he said that. But that's just not our normal go-to move to say, take my word for it, right? I had a religious discussion with a coworker here not too long ago, and him, knowing my faith, obviously took a little bit of a jab, which is fine. That's why we have discussions. And he says, I just can't get behind any religion that says that they have a person that's the only person that can receive revelation from God. To which my immediate reaction and response was, well, then you have no concept of how revelation actually works. And he says, well, that's just how some churches do it, trying to mask that he's not talking about mine. And to which I responded, in my church, we have somebody who receives revelation for the globe, the earth, the global church. He is a prophet. We also have other people that receive revelations for their specific jurisdictions, whether it be an area, a stake, a ward, whatever. Those people receive revelations. We have mothers and fathers who receive revelation for their jurisdiction, the home. We have children who receive revelation on their jurisdiction, which is their classes, their homework, their school, their sports, whatever. Everybody receives revelation. And in fact, when a prophet or some priest or authority says revelation, our job then is not to say, oh, well, it was revealed through a prophet, it's a done deal. We can do that. I guess my argument is that's just kind of lazy when we have the ability to gain revelation for ourselves and know for certainty for ourselves that that prophet, that stake president, that bishop has just said something true. We can do that. So that is a great thing about that. That is a great tool that we have as far as receiving revelation. It's not just one man. Everybody can receive revelation. Even if you're not a member of the church, you can receive revelation. That is a thing. But what can also be helpful in our search for truth is a proper understanding of epistemology. And of course, I have a poor understanding of epistemology to where I'm probably even saying the word wrong, but that is something that we can employ as well. Epistemology is something that might normally be considered like the scientific method, right? But it's been around long before science. Well, whatever you would call science was, right? It was a method that was used for philosophers to find truth, dating back a long, long time ago. And it's basically that, which is just how to find out what truth is. And it's got 3 schools. So just a quick summary of these 3 schools, and feel free to correct me in the comments below if I mess this up, and I'm sure I will. But the first school would be rationalism, which is the idea that truth can be deciphered or arrived to through argument, through raucous debate, through talking it out, right? And that's a thing. I think it's a valid point. I think that's a very useful tool in finding out what truth is, whether it's science, whether it's religion. If we were to say that those are 2 separate things, I don't think they are, but if we were to say that, rationalism is help. We need to talk about things. We need to have a debate. The problem is when you get people, and it happens, that thinks that that's the only way. They'll not even worry about the other 2 schools. This is the only way to find out with truth. You and I are going to argue about it. And that just is, you will never come out to truth. You will never have an exchange through argument. You might get closer in a discussion, I guess, but it just doesn't work. And for people that think, well, that's not how that works in religion. Oh, let me correct you. I've had conversations with other very religious people, Bible-loving Christians. We won't name any names, Jehovah's Witness. And I apologize if this is not a correct summary of how Jehovah's Witnesses believe, but these two individuals that have quoted this to me were both Jehovah's Witnesses, and I was a little blown away when they said, you can't pray to find truth. You can't receive revelation to find truth. That's only of the devil. What you have to do is you have to reason it out. You have to argue it out. You have to and arrive to it logically. And I was just struck that this is another man of faith saying this to me. It was rather shocking. Two individuals of faith who were saying this to me. And I just don't buy it. Rationalism is not the only way to do it. The second school of epistemology would be skepticism, the skeptical approach, which is to say, don't believe it until you prove it out through experimentation. I.e., if you're a scientist, I have a hypothesis. I think this is the way it works. Let's try it. Let's conduct an experiment, right? And there are people that think that this is the only way to prove out truth is through skepticism, which doubt unrestrained is never, in my opinion, a way to find out anything except just more doubt, right? You can doubt and doubt. You can get positive results from an experiment and still doubt it. And then do some more experiments and still doubt it, which is why today the scientific community refers to gravity as the theory of gravity. Even though we see it 24/7, 365, we can't get away from it. It is a governing principle in our life. We can mathematically equate what the gravity is depending upon what the core elements of the planet is, yada, yada, yada. We know so much about it, and it's still referred to as the theory of gravity, because they're being skeptical. Perhaps at some point we can be a little less skeptical. I don't know. It's just an idea. And then there comes the third school of epistemology, which is, of course, my favorite, which is empiricism. And once again, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the idea that truth can be derived through senses, through seeing, through smelling, through hearing, through tasting, through touching, whatever. If you can sense it, then it's real. Right? The wind is a perfect example. What is wind? Well, I don't know, but I can feel it. I know. Well, let's have a theory of how wind happens. That's a theory. But I know that wind exists because I can feel it, right? That is empirical. That is empirical evidence. So to an empiricist, all that matters is two things. And I can't remember the guy's name, but a guy from Monty Python who is an atheist was talking about this, and it really clicked for me. He said, to an empiricist, only two things matter. Number one, did it happen? Number two, can we get it to happen again? And I find no better explanation for how we have spiritual experiences, right? Hold on. Did that just happen? And secondly, how do I get that to happen again? Oh, it just happened again? Okay, how do I get to happen again and have it happen on a regular basis? That's what spiritual experiences always is. And what we're talking about here is not a blind obedience. When we talk about the schools of epistemology and finding truth, this is stepping away from blind obedience, which isn't necessarily bad. Everybody has to push that I believe button at some point in some time. But I think it's better if we can move away from that and move more to an informed decision making. I am a person of faith because of this. That seems like a better way to go. I don't know. I'm not so much of a blind obedience guy. I'm more of an informed decision making guy, I guess. So for an empiricist, the formula A plus B will equal C is what matters, right? If I get A and B, do those things together, C happened. How do I make it happen? From that point, the only other work is how do I remove other things from that formula, the hidden variables in that A plus B formula, so that I get C on a more consistent basis. I'll give you an example. In my house, I have a sink, and on that sink there is a faucet. And in this faucet, if I turn it on, I can get hot or cold water on demand anytime I want. It is a miracle of the world we live in. It is a phenomenal thing that we take for granted all the time. Running water at my faucet. It's clean, it's delicious, and it's there whenever I want it. I don't have to go to the well. I don't have to go to the creek. It is there. All I have to do is turn it on. And I do this 24/7. I can turn that faucet on and water comes. And 365 days a year, ever since I was a kid, ever since I was able to turn on a faucet, water is always there. And then invariably what happens is that time and place where you go to turn on that water and no water comes. When that happens, and try to remember when that's happened in your own life, when you've turned on that faucet and no water comes, what is your immediate response? What did you do? Well, if you're like most humans, if you're like me, your immediate reaction was to try the faucet again. Go on, off, on, off. Wait, what's going on here? You're going to try it a couple of times because that water is there on such a dependable basis that the fact that it's not here now has to do with something in how I'm interacting with the faucet. It has to be me, right? That's why, or maybe the handle's broken or something. We're trying to figure it out because it's just inconceivable, this event. The same thing happens with the light switch, right? We go to turn that light switch on, which is there 24/7, 365 days a year, and we turn on that light and no light comes on. What's the first thing we do? Well, we try the light a couple of times because it has to be me and it's got to be the switch or something. What is going on? That informed decision making is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the School of Epistemology. And we can push the I believe button. It's just that we don't have to as much as we are. And of course, good sources are always there for us to use. Well, as always, what used to be the Three Mormons, I guess, whatever they're called now, Saints Unscripted, I guess, Latter-day Q&A, All In podcasts. These are great sources that are out there. Use them. Scriptures, local bishop, stake president, prayer, faith. These are all great resources. Use them. Use them in an epistemological, if I can make up a word, I think that's a word, an epistemological way. Use those sources to derive truth. If somebody says something that's true, gain the revelation yourself. You don't have to be such a skeptic. You can have a little bit of faith and then go gain the revelation yourself and say, yeah, that is true. I know for myself it is. If somebody says something anti, you could probably be a little bit more skeptical, but find out what the truth is. It works. I promise you it works. So it's probably worthwhile to talk a little bit about recognizing and how we can overcome the doubt traps that are used. And this is by no means a exhaustive list. I'm sure there's other doubt traps that I'm missing, but these are some of the ones that kind of jump to my mind. The first one is the talking trash game, right? And this is something that is probably used by all the anti-ers, right? These are the ones that, and what are the signs of the talking trash game? These are the guys who just start throwing everything they can. Truths, half-truths, lies. They just throw out so much information that the person listening says, well, there's a lot here. There must be something to it. There's just so much. CS letter is a perfect example of the talking trash game. You were just going to overwhelm people with half-truths and exaggerations. Or what they might do is the defense attorney game, which is we're going to cherry pick a few things out of your total things. We're going to pull out a few things and we're going to sow doubt in those one or two things. In my previous life in being law enforcement, I saw this all the time. And because of this, I have a deep disregard, distrust, disrespect, disattitude towards defense attorneys in general because I've seen the shyster games they pull. They're the worst. I apologize to any defense attorneys that are out there, but I'm pretty sure you're a liar. It's just my personal experience. Sorry, but that's what it is. Because they would do this where I would have a list of reasons why I felt somebody was guilty of a crime. And they would pull out a couple, not all of them, and they wouldn't even talk. They don't want to talk about the whole list. They would pull out a couple and in front of the jury try to poke some holes in it. And they do it very well, right? You think of it this way. I arrest somebody for DUI. Everybody knows what a drunk looks like. If it walks, talks, smells, and speaks like a drunk, hey, chances are it's a drunk, right? Well, now what a defense attorney would say is, how do you know he was drunk? Because you have to prove it beyond reasonable doubt, right? That's a pretty high standard. So how do you do it? He doesn't talk about all the other things I had. He pulls out a couple of things and he says, well, you say he had slurred speech. Have you heard him before? Do you know if he had slurred speech before? No. Well, then how do you know that my client's slurred speech was because of alcoholism or because he drank? Well, that's easy, because I'm glad I'm here today. This was something that was taught to me by other law enforcement, and when used, frustrates the crud out of defense attorneys, and they just get angry about it because you start testifying to the jury in great manner. They say, how do you know that this was caused by him drinking? Well, I guess I don't specifically based on that message, but I'm glad I'm here today to add expert testimony as an expert witness as to all the reasons in totality of circumstances why I know beyond the reasonable shadow of doubt that your client was drunk, and these circumstances are boom, 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 boom. You do that once, you do that twice, you start bringing in all the other things that you saw, all the other evidence of the crime. You do that once, you do that twice, and they won't let you do it anymore. They'll try and interrupt you, they'll object, and they'll do all kinds of other things, but they're asking a question, right? So you can do that in this as well. You can do that when you play the defense attorney game. You just go back to the totality of the circumstances. Well, how do you know this is because of this? Well, I don't for sure on that one particular issue, but I'm glad I'm here to give my testimony of this, and the other thing that leads me to believe, under consideration of the totality of circumstances, that I know the Church of Jesus Christ to be true beyond the shadow of a doubt. We can do that. Another sign of the talking trash game is the simple absence of an alternative. They can talk trash about whatever it is they're talking, and this, you see this in politics, whatever. They can talk trash and talk down and punch down about whatever institution they want. The next question to me is, so what's your alternative? What else do you got? And if they're, a preacher from another religion or something, I'm sure they'll start talking to you about their religion, which is always a better ground. Let's talk about your religion. Tell me what you believe and why you believe these things. And accept their faith. That's awesome. That's awesome that you believe that way. What we see nowadays in the antis that are out there is that they just don't have it. They're not offering a better alternative. They're wrecking families. They're screwing up kids left and right with nothing to replace it with. But by the way, give me money so I can continue doing this. Their ministry is simply that, a ministry of hate, of anger, of frustration, which none of those things are Christ-like things, but that's what they're doing. So really listen to them and find out if they're tearing down or if they're building up. If they are building up, in my mind, that's somebody who just stands on a little bit more better ground as far as what they're saying. I want to listen to that person more than just somebody who's tearing down. Another thing that people use in the doubt trap, another doubt trap that people use is the list of anachronisms, right? They'll go through all these anachronisms. And for those that, I'm sure everybody's heard this word before, but for those that have heard the word anachronism before, an anachronism is basically something that is not correct with the time and place that is being talked about. I.e., if I were to bring up a document from a guy from the 1200s, and in this guy in the 1200s, he says, I drove my car to the supermarket. Well, anybody would look at that and say, okay, that's probably not true because number one, they didn't have cars. Number two, they didn't have supermarkets or even the concept of what cars or supermarkets were. Number three, they had no idea what the word drive meant, right? That wasn't even a word in the 1200s. Probably, maybe it was. I don't know. I don't think it was, though. So you can very quickly say these are anachronistic of what we're talking about, so obviously this document is false. They try and do this all the time, and with great success they do this with the Book of Mormon. But it's such a crazy thing to do, because what they have to step over and what we must rely on at all times is, how much does the Book of Mormon get right? And in their viewpoint, we can also say it as, how much did Joseph Smith, because in their viewpoint, Joseph Smith created the Book of Mormon, right? So if Joseph Smith, a faulted man, a liar, a charlatan, whatever they want to say, created the Book of Mormon, how did he get all the things right that he got right? Well, what do you mean? What did he get right? Well, let me tell you. Let me tell you the things that Joseph Smith had no way of knowing at that time that were viewed as anachronistic, but since then, science has proved that it is not. And there is a list of things out there, because time is proving proving the Book of Mormon to be more right and truthful. I think it was Latter-day Q&A, and I'm sure others do a great job in illustrating this, where they show a list of anachronisms that were present in the time when the Book of Mormon first come out. Book of Mormon first comes out, detractors to the Book of Mormon bring out this list of, this is not correct because of this, this is not correct because of this, this is not correct because of this, and there's this huge list. And then in the next column they show how many of those anachronisms still exist today. And I think it's like half, 2/3 of those anachronisms have actually been proven correct. We've found out since then. I mean, the idea that ancient Jews and also ancient pre-Columbian Americans did not write on tablets. That was an anachronism. Guess what? We have since found in both things that they did. We've found tablets with writing on them from both ancient cultures. So that is a thing. Explain that. Explain why Joseph Smith would even talk about plates if he was making this up. This is something that Young Men's president, Dave Wilcox, Brother Wilcox brings up. He says, when he talks about individuals talking about Joseph Smith as a liar, he says that if you think that's the case, then you don't understand what a liar is, or what a liar does, or why he does it. A liar does not lie to be more unbelievable. He will create a lie that is more believable. So he wouldn't create a story about 3 separate beings that goes against every Christian theology at the time. He would go for something more believable. He would create a book that was more believable than the Book of Mormon, but he didn't, right? He put out what he put out and let it be. Brother Wilcox points this out as a sign that he was being truthful, because it's not a believable lie. However, it is a very believable truth, especially as anachronisms get shown. And also in this column, like a half or 2/3 of those have been proven to be correct. And then there's a whole bunch of others of anachronisms that are in the process of being. In other words, they found a little bit, but they're being scientific about it. They found a little bit. There's something there. And so they got to keep looking at it and doing it, and it's in the process of being proven. So there's still a couple of them. There's still some anachronisms out there, but I testify, I believe anyway, I don't know if it's a testimony, I believe that in time, all of the anachronisms will be off that page. Maybe 1 or 2 will still be around, but sooner or later, science will catch up to the prophet. Science will catch up to the Book of Mormon, and it will be in total agreement. Time is proving the Book of Mormon to be more right. Another doubt trap that the anti-ers use is the idea of this system shock, right? We're going to bring up something kind of scandalous, something that wasn't known about before. And really, this is something that I think is being used against us because we created the problem, you know. I think that it became our culture to where we kind of hid what we felt were skeletons in the closet. Because if you grew up during the 80s, during the 90s, these were great times for missionary work. These were, man, it was going gangbusters because there was this idea of eternal marriage that really resonated with individuals trying to hold on to their families. They loved that idea, and they wanted to hear more about this only church that they know of that talked about eternal families and continuing revelation and all these things. A plan of salvation will tell me more about that. And in that effort of bringing in all these individuals, because this was good news, this was the good news of the gospel, what we talked less about is what we felt were problematic things, like polygamy, like bank problems in the early church history, like the Mountain Meadows Massacre, yada, 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 whatever you got, right? We talk less about those things, as we should, because our focus should be on Christ. This is what we should spend our time talking about. But in not talking about it at all and having it be a taboo subject, what we did is we laid a crack in the foundation for our children that's being wedged today. I think a large reason why we're seeing so many have faith crisis right now is because we haven't been talking about these things as much as we probably should. In measure, right? Of course, we should always be talking about Christ. That is the focus. But we should also not leave any blind spots. I'll give you an example. For me, polygamy has never been an issue. Not that I'm for it. I'm glad we don't do it. I think any man who goes into a polygamous relationship is crazy. I have too much of a difficult time disappointing one woman. I have no idea how what a masochistic thing you have to, sadomasochistic thing you have to be involved in to where you want that kind of misery in your life to be a man with multiple wives. I have no idea. But that being said, the fact that we have polygamy in our history was never an issue for me. Just like we have polygamy in the Bible. That's not an issue for me as well because A, doesn't affect me now. B, why not? It was their culture, right? It was never an issue for me because it wasn't the first time I heard of it. When an anti came up to me and said, yeah, you know your church believes in polygamy? My clear and quick response was, we used to. Yeah, I know that. No, you guys still do. No, we don't, but we used to. Let me talk to you more about that. It wasn't a shock. I was prepared for it because I remember an older sister, back when I was a kid and as a youth, I remember hearing her talk in a Sunday school class, and she said that she kind of wanted to be in a polygamous relationship. She would love to have a sister wife. That was a conversation that was had in a Sunday school, to where that little young Porter did not blink one bit when he heard about polygamy later on. It was a normalized thing, I guess. And it's a tricky road. The idea is it shouldn't be taboo. We need to talk about these things. What do you got? Searstone? What do you got? The Lost Manuscript? What do you got? Whatever it is. Talk about it now with your kids. Have it as a discussion as a family home evening. Not a Sunday school class about it, but when it gets mentioned in Sunday school class, it's not taboo. Put it out there. Let somebody find out what we feel are skeletons. I don't feel they are, but what other people feel are skeletons in our church, in a situation in which they are surrounded by friends and fellow believers who will help them through whatever it is that's going to cause them a problem. If we just taboo it and say don't talk about it, then there's this crack that later on an anti will fill with a wedge and start pounding on it. And at that point, guess what? We don't have the ability to talk to him as much as we did in that more better environment. That's the system shock idea. And I think, once again, I just think it's our fault. Ultimately, with anything system shock, if you were to find out today, anything system shocky, right? If I were to find out that the beloved prophet Russell Lamb was doing something he really shouldn't be doing on his phone, right? If that was some scandal that came out, if Google did a full disclosure on what Russell Lamb was looking up on his phone, and we found out some crazy stuff, It wouldn't affect me one bit. I'd be like, oh, that sucks, President. Well, talk to your bishop. Good luck with that, because it doesn't affect all the other things the totality of circumstances of other experiences that I've had in my life. So does it matter? Does it matter whatever the negative thing was? Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully that system shock will be, oh, that's rough. But I'm glad I have temple experiences, my covenants, my daily scripture reading, whatever it is. That's why I have these other things in my life, because I don't rely on whether or not the prophet is making good moral choices. I hope he is. Doesn't bother me if he doesn't, because I have my own testimony I'm going off of. So on the scale, what I would suggest is this. I would suggest even stop it now, because everything else I'm going to say here today is really, there's nothing there. It's a waste of time. So sit down with yourself and prayerfully go about this exercise. Get yourself a piece of paper and make yourself a worksheet. Split that paper right down the half. On the left side of that paper, write the reasons why you believe the church is true. Not the Book of Mormon, not the prophet, not the gospel, not whether or not I believe in God, but the reasons why I believe the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is true. One side of the page. Let me warn you, use small print when you write out those reasons, because you'll find there's many of them. And on the other side of this page, write your con list, right? These are the things I struggle with. And feel free to use as big of a font as you want, because I'm pretty much sure there'll be maybe 4 or 5 things on that side of the page. As you're doing it, you might realize and come up with a 6th. As you do that, as you prepare that worksheet, what you will find is a very uneven scale. Don't put your finger on that scale. Just see it for what it is. What you will see is so many more reasons, so many more totality of circumstances, reasons why you believe the church to be true. And what I would suggest is why you would let those 4 or 5 things that you have doubts about, not that you know are false, but that you have doubts about, mess with all the other things that you know to be true and correct. Put it on the scale. That is ultimately, I think, how we will always have to defeat these doubt traps. They'll get us. They'll hit us with something. There will be something that will always get us. But if we have our totality of the circumstances, if we have the scale set, we will always be able to see epistemologically what is truth. And I testify of that to you. I would like to close as you're preparing your worksheet, because I know you're all doing it. I would like to propose, and maybe in the comments down below, just go ahead and throw out how many pros you had and how many cons you had. I would like to see those numbers. At the end of my story, I'd like to tell the story of who is my favorite antire. I have a worst, my most, and I'll use the word hated antire. I'll never talk about that person. He's the name we do not speak of. He's the worst. He's a horrible man. But I will talk about this individual, because she is my favorite antire. Her name is Fawn Brodie. Now, some of you may be aware of this story. Some of you might. I don't know. That's why I'm sharing it now. Fawn Brodie was a sister who was and I apologize if I get some of these details incorrect, she was the niece of David O. McKay. So she was kind of connected. And she used this before the Joseph Smith papers came out. She used her connections, and she kind of traded on McKay's name, David O. McKay's name and status, to get access to church archives and documents that have all now been fully released in the Joseph Smith papers. Because the church have kind of, I think, learned this lesson of, why are we trying to hide the skeletons in the closet when the skeletons are closet? Ain't that bad? And number 2, when seen in the totality of the circumstances, it's actually can be beneficial to us. I think that's why we have the Joseph Smith papers today and other documents like it, because we've learned that lesson. But this was before that time. Fawn Brodie was kind of the first breakaway big antire, maybe of the modern times, right? So what she did is she gained access to these archives, and she wrote a book. And it was a bestseller book, and it was an expose on Joseph Smith and a bunch of half-lies, some truths. There's definitely some truths in that book, and some outright lies about Joseph Smith, just like every anti-er does. And she made a lot of money on this book. Of course, she's not a member anymore. She stepped away from the church, or was asked to step away from the church, whichever. And she lived a very successful life in New York, very wealthy, and did just fine. And that was the basic gist of the Fawn Brodie story up until she contracted cancer. And she had a very, very tough battle with cancer. And of course, this is not something that you'd ever wish on anybody, anti-er or not. And she got to a point where the doctors didn't understand why she was not dead. Maybe even miraculously, you might say. And I apologize if I get this, but I believe the what I read is that it was like 60 or 80% of her body mass was cancerous tumor. That's how riddled she had gotten. She was just littered with, it was, and yet she was not dying. She was not dying. Not a pleasant experience, I'm sure. What this anti-er, what this enemy to the church, what this decrier of Joseph Smith did at this time, to me, is very instructional in that she called up her brother, who was still an active member of the church, a priesthood holder, and asked him to come and give her a blessing. Now, we know this happened because in her own handwriting, she writes, "I have asked my brother for a blessing. This does not impact my views on what I've said about Joseph Smith one bit." And of course, I'm paraphrasing here. But the reason why she said she's asked for a blessing is because she was in a great deal of pain. And that she remembered as a child her father giving her priesthood blessings, and the peace and comfort that would always come with those priesthood blessings. My goodness. So she asked for this blessing. And the brother, of course, says, I got to see if this is okay. If it was anybody else, it'd be absolutely, but this is you we're talking about. Let me go check to make sure I'm okay. And when he goes and asks the brother, and hey, can I give my sister Fawn Brodie a blessing? The answer was unequivocally and very quickly, of course. Give that poor woman a blessing. There was no discussion on her sins. There was no discussions of her worthiness. There was no discussions of the enemy of the church. None of that. The immediate answer was, of course, go and minister. And he did. And he gave her a blessing. I hope that she found the peace that she found when she was a little child, when she received that blessing. That same peace that all of us, maybe not all of us, but most of us have felt when we receive priesthood blessings. When you face a doubt trap, let me implore you to remember that feeling when you received a priesthood blessing, and know that that is only available in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints through priesthood authority. And I say these things to you in the name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.